What is up, everybody? We are back. This is the OG3. That is Chris. That is Mo. I'm Jeff, hosting again this week. This is going to be a college football heavy show for everybody. So thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Thanks for supporting the Off the Ball Network. Again, this is one of the truly great college football schedules in the history of college football. I'm not making that up. This is a real thing. Every college football fan, since the schedule came out, at the end of the spring, had this circled on the calendar. This was movement day. This was the day when a lot of teams were going to get judged. This was the day when a lot of conferences were going to swing. It's crazy. Some of the luster has come off, but it's still going to be a great Saturday of college football. And I got two great minds here to talk about it with Mo Murphy and Chris LeBron, my partners at the Off the Ball Network. It's going to be great. Chris, we're trying to get him out of here so he can get to bed early. Apparently Chris got some issues staying up late with his team. His team now plays in the Any Coast Conference, so a game can be on at any time of the day and at any time of the morning. But we're a couple Buckeyes sitting here undefeated. I got a Hurricane sitting here undefeated. Gentlemen, it's going to be awesome. And thanks for coming on.
Oh, 100%. This week. I've been this Saturday has been marked on my calendar since the schedule dropped over the summer. And I know they say it lost some of its luster, but can we just blame SEC fans for why it lost some of its luster? Sure. Oklahoma lost a bad game and they've stunk all year and they've just skated by winning games. Ole Miss didn't hold it down and walk into October 12th being undefeated like they were supposed to be.
LSU took a Big Ten loss.
Yep, lost to USC, which is now a bad team that makes one of the games that we were supposed to look forward to in Penn State. USC is not as much fun. Tennessee loses a game in a spot where Florida, Tennessee, we know it looks great at night, but them losing a game now, it's like, man, they're playing for their season. If Florida upsets them, like Tennessee's nowhere near as good a team as we thought. I'm just saying, if it lost its luster, we really could blame the SEC for most.
But I will say there's, we're going to stick to the heavyweights on the schedule, but also some games gain some more interest because of all these things too, because I think Tennessee losing last week makes Florida, Tennessee actually a little more watchable because like now somebody's on like, alert. Honestly, a game that I added to my schedule that I didn't plan on, which is the nightcap. Hopefully I'm still sane and halfway coherent after the Oregon High State game. Kansas State, Colorado is real interesting right now. I say interesting. I don't know how important it's going to be, but we're talking two teams that can still win the conference. We know all the hype around Colorado and so forth and everything. So I think that game at the end of the day became more interesting. And then if you want to stay up late, watch Ashton Genty play for Boise State, in the middle of the night. Chris, we know you'll be asleep by then. I know you're more of a
football
and
an 11
noon
p.m.
game guy.
Disgusting. Absolutely. I'm still recovering from last week and now, suddenly I can't stand Cal fans. Like I never thought that would be a thing that I would care about, Cal football or Cal sports. Now like I can't stand Cal fans. Because they were talking a lot of junk. 3.5 quarters.
And now Cal's got to. By the way, Cal coming back to Pittsburgh. That's just toss that in like when you're looking at scores. Interesting game now to see how they follow it up.
I'm gonna hate watch that game.
I mean, the schedule's deep, but we're just gonna hit on some bullet points here. So we're kind of got to go through some some of our takes and some bigger questions about the games. We know there's a lot of breakdown, but there'll be more. I think it's going to be more important the outcome of this week, than going into it. I think this is about let's see what happens and then start figuring some things out. Me and Mo is going to talk about the Heisman race next week, talk about the ramifications. Now talk about the paths. We can start talking about paths of the playoffs the teams have after this week. So it's going to be great. So we'll start out here. Penn State, USC. Again, Mo touched on it. USC, dropping a couple games in the Big Ten already. And one of them being Minnesota, I didn't think they looked great. Obviously they didn't live up to that ranking that they got early. They got a ton of credit for beating Michigan. Me and Mo talked about it Sunday on his show. But I guess my takeaway from it is, and this really isn't a gambling show, but just in general, I see we got Penn State only -5 over a USC team that we just saw lose to Minnesota. And I basically asked you guys, is this a trick? And what do you think of this game, Mo? What do you think of Penn State USC now that we've had 6 weeks to look at these teams?
I think now this is a game where, sometimes you get through the season, you have expectations. Middle of the season, you're nowhere near as good as you thought you would be. But now you play that role of like, let's ruin another team's season. And you got USC who still, like, even though they got 2 Big Ten losses, I know like it's an outside shot to make the Big Ten championship. But like, there's a if they handle business and beat Penn State, and then the winner of Ohio State and Oregon, that puts one of those teams ahead of them with a loss. Like whoever loses that game, now one of those teams have a loss. You look at Ohio State, who if they lost, they still got Penn State on the schedule. They got Michigan. They got Nebraska. Like they have a couple games where you're like, okay, they could be a 2-loss team too. Start thinking about what the tiebreaker would be. So like if USC wins this game and it gives Penn State a loss, another team in the Big Ten that's ahead of them, and they have that, they would have them one up if Penn State loses to Ohio State, if Oregon loses to Ohio State this week and then drops another game. So and then Penn State loses to Ohio State. Now they're a 2-loss Big Ten team. So for me, I think USC, this is a way they win this game. The rest of their season starts looking a little different. Now you need some help and all that, but trying to get into the Big Ten championship, like it's not all over until this Saturday. If they take their 3rd loss in the Big Ten, I promise you this.
It's a wrap.
Season, I would be completely surprised if there was a 3-loss Big Ten team playing in the conference championship. I think 2 is the max. I think 2 losses is the max, but I still think with 2 losses being the max, I think USC is playing for they are on their last life and last breath of hope for what the season could be for them and trying to reach a playoff spot. And so beating Penn State, having that number 4 win on your resume coming into your town before the college football playoff rankings, I think is very important. But I think Penn State knows what's at stake. I think traveling to California, they understand, like, we're undefeated. We're the number 4 team in the country. We have an opportunity to win the Big Ten. We're going to be playing right before, so we can put on a show against USC leading up to that Ohio State-Oregon game, and then we could be looking as a front runner. If we beat USC and beat them in convincing fashion, after that Ohio State-Oregon game concludes, it looked like it'll be a 2-man race between Penn State and the winner of that Ohio State-Oregon game to compete and see each other in the Big Ten championship.
Yeah, so Chris, everything Mo said about what USC's got on the line, I agree with. It's the other side of that. Can USC beat Penn State? Or who do you think? What do you think about the winner of this game?
I don't know. Penn State can run the ball, and obviously USC can't stop the run. But what's crazy is Minnesota didn't run the ball good. They're like one of the bottom tier teams in rushing. So it's just
Minnesota's not that good of a team.
No, that was a bad loss. I understand Michigan. All right, we understand Michigan and why they lost their game, establishing that Michigan, we know they're going to run it down your neck, right? I can understand that loss, even though they should have won that game too. But losing in Minnesota, that's like, okay, all right. I understand the Michigan, like I said, but Minnesota, that's a game you need to win. They're at the crib in this one. Maybe that loss gets them a little bit motivated, but man, I think Penn State is. I think Penn State should win this one. I think they're going to run the ball effectively, which is not hard to do against USC. They're going to run the ball very efficiently, and I think they'll. It won't be a high scoring game. I think it'll be low scoring, but I think Penn State takes care of business. They should win this game by 10 plus points, just simply because their run game is pretty good, and USC can't stop.
Yeah,
anyone on the ground, and that's just you can't go into the Big Ten. And that's my thing. I understand it's your first year in the conference, but you should know, okay, we're going into a conference like the Big Ten. It's not like the Pac-12 where we can air it out. We got to be able to run the ball and stop the run. And USC can't do either. And that's my thing. And listen, I know there's things with Lincoln Riley, Hotsy and all, but maybe this year he might get a pass as his year 1 in the Big Ten. But if he don't figure this thing out at the line of scrimmage by next season, I'm sorry. I know, I like Lincoln, but hey, you got to figure it out, because if you don't, it's gonna continue to get nastier and nastier, because teams are just gonna get better and better.
And yeah, like Mo said, I'm leaning. My take is I think Penn State is going to go out there. I think they're going to play great, because this is a perfect this is a perfect prop up team because USC is still getting a little too much credit for a close loss to Michigan. I'm always worried about teams that get credit for close losses. It always backfires that they ride a close loss all year. But I mean, we've saw, like, if we're going to be honest with ourselves, we've learned more about Michigan. We know about Minnesota. I think Penn State goes out there and is like, we're going to look awesome against USC, and that brand win is going to carry us for a few weeks, and people still have in the back of their mind. But I don't think USC is that good. I think Penn State whoops them, and then I think they put them. And I think this is the end of the USC season, and they're going to be talking about, like, wow, we finished sixth in the Big Ten. Like, we got some questions to answer.
Jeff,
so
real quick, remember when we moved to the Ole Miss LSU game?
We're all going to move to that next.
Question. Oh, we're going to that next. Okay. Yeah. I have a question once we get there.
Okay. We'll go to Ole Miss LSU right now. Again, the Ole Miss, kind of surprising losses, taking some of this away. I think going into Tiger Stadium, adds a lot to it. I think that's why we give LSU hasn't looked as good as we probably wanted them to. They took a loss to USC early. But this is more of a, honestly, this is more of a personality, name recognition, visual game than it probably is an actual contest between good teams. But it's important because we talked about it. Me and Mo talked about it. Ole Miss kind of blew one of their, their get out of jail cards already, which is tough against Kentucky. So now, like, even if I feel like, they're definitely a better team than LSU, they can't slip up again in what's going to be a competitive SEC. So yeah, basically my question was, but you guys talk about, whatever you like about the game. My overall question was just like, can Brian Kelly or Kiffin afford a loss on this stage at this point in their season and their career, considering, Ole Miss already has the one versus Kentucky, and Kelly's like, if he has another 2-loss season halfway through the season already, then we're like, oh, here we go again. So Mo, go ahead. You got some thoughts on LSU Ole Miss?
Yeah. So to answer your question, yes, I think Kelly can, I think he can lose. I don't think Lane Kiffin can. And I think it's everything to do with what both programs did over the summer. Ole Miss loaded up on talent coming into the season. Remember, I mean, we talked about Texas, Alabama, Ohio State, Oregon, Georgia. Don't forget that outside team, that fifth best team in the country was Ole Miss. That loaded roster, the offense supposed to be one of the top 3 offenses in the country. Jackson Dart for Heisman. They're loaded at wide receiver. The only wide receiver room better than them in the country is Ohio State. They got that guy from Texas A&M in the transfer portal. Like, remember, they hit the portal hard, loaded up to tell you, like, this is a year we're going to compete for the SEC, possibly win and be a title contender. And so now, like, you'll be at a 2-loss team with still some losable games left on your schedule. So now you're talking about a team that might not play in the SEC championship, might not make the playoffs, and might finish 9-3. I think that's a bad look when you're talking about this one of the most loaded rosters Ole Miss has ever had, where Brian Kelly, let's say he loses a close game. Typical, like, this is a Brian Kelly team. This is what it looks like. LSU got a real quarterback coming in as of right now in Underwood, coming in as a freshman next year. So when you think about stuff like that, think about their recruiting class and giving him, I think he'll get a little more grace because LSU's roster is not as talented as Ole Miss. My thing is how much, because Chris said this talking about USC, and I was not thinking about this, but it made me think about it because of what Chris said. He said, I hear all the Lincoln Riley on the hot seat stuff. I think he might have one more year because it's his first year in the Big Ten. I 90% agree with everything Chris said, except the answer to my question would be maybe he thinks a little different. If LSU beats Ole Miss and Penn State smacks USC, how bad does that make Lincoln Riley look? Because they won that game. And now you have you beat an LSU team that beat an Ole Miss team. We know how big of a game that is and how important of a game that is for this primary weekend of October 12th being like the greatest weekend in college football. But if LSU wins and looks like a strong team, how much more grace are we giving Lincoln Riley? Because you won that game and your 3 losses, you went and lost to Michigan, lost to Minnesota, and then got pounded by Penn State. Like, I think now you could be looking at a Lincoln Riley a little bit different. Like, you got you opened the season with an SEC win. Like, you beat a team in the SEC that people were calling SEC championship contenders coming into the season. So the almighty SEC, you got that win, and then you can't run through the Big Ten, which is supposed to be second fiddle to the SEC and you lost to Michigan, Minnesota, and possibly Penn State, are we looking at Lincoln Riley? Are we still giving him the Big Ten pass if LSU beats Ole Miss? Or are you even thinking of correlating those games like that? Would be my, like, when you're watching this game, are you even correlating what we think of Lincoln Riley from here on out in his first year in the Big Ten if LSU wins this game? Because if LSU beats Ole Miss, they'll be considered a damn good team. They'll be in the top 10, and they'll be, you know, in that conversation with Texas and Alabama as far as in Georgia, as far as being able to compete and play for an SEC championship, if they're able to get this win under their belt. Do you value Lincoln Riley and giving him any more excuses a little less? I think we're already at the end, and that's why Chris is where, like, we'll give him a pass for this year, and I think it'd be super loud. I think Chris would agree with that. It'll be super loud, hot seat. He'll enter the season on the hot seat next year. But, like, if LSU wins this game, does it make 3 losses by USC look completely worse? Like, you beat a team in the almighty conference, and now all of a sudden you have 3 losses in a second fiddle conference that everybody say is second behind the SEC. There's a wide gap. It just means more, but you got 3 losses in this, and you're supposed to be probably arguably the best offensive-minded coach in this conference. You're supposed to be one of the top guys. So that would be my thought of this game is, do you correlate the Ole Miss LSU, and does it matter? Like, if LSU does beat Ole Miss and Lincoln Riley gets smacked around earlier by Penn State, are you looking at him a little different?
That's fair. What do you think of this this game down in the Bayou, Chris?
I think it's a very intriguing game, very intriguing matchup, and
it is,
and
very much
it's because it's
a matchup between 2 super annoying coaches too. Whether you like them or not, they're annoying.
yeah,
that's true.
It really.
I'll say irritating. They irritate people, good or bad. They irritate people, which is awesome. I love it. I love the coaching personalities. I love the guys that I can name. I love the guys that lose their shit.
The match. Yeah. And like with Brian Kelly, like he just, I don't know, he still doesn't feel like he's an SEC guy. Like
you haven't heard the accent, but he sounds super Louisiana.
The accent. And then after that first, when they lost to USC, that whole thing, but you know, did both teams kind of? I don't know if it's not a must win, especially in the 12-team playoff, but it kind of feels like
I
that.
think for Ole Miss, it's real close.
Must win
for Ole Miss,
get their second one. Remember, both teams will get their second loss. Whoever loses the game,
and that's and if you're LSU,
but more importantly, Ole Miss would have 2 SEC losses.
2 SEC losses.
Yeah,
that would be tough.
But if you're LSU, you're kind of like the way you, especially like you said, like if Penn State like goes in and absolutely destroys USC, you kind of got to be like, damn, man, like we really won't let one slip, you know, like damn, we should be undefeated right now. And in Ole Miss, like they came in, everybody was talking about their offense and everything, but you know, when we said it, like they haven't played it. It's not like they played like low. They were playing they played Wake Forest. Like that was their best opponent, and like the bottom tier ACC team. Like they were playing nobody. And then when they finally got tested against an underrated Kentucky team, like, you know, the Kentucky team must be Georgia, you know, so they had, you know, and then they took care of business, but like, you kind of feel like, all right, you got tested, and like we got punched in the mouth against Kentucky at the line of scrimmage too. So it's like, okay, we got to come out. And then they had a good win versus South Carolina. That was an impressive win. You know, that was a good win for South Carolina. They came out, they showed out. So like, which team do we get? Which Ole Miss team do we get? Same thing with LSU. LSU's defense hasn't been good. You know, so can Ole Miss's high-powered offense take advantage of LSU's poor defense? That's going to be the big thing.
And I think
a very interesting matchup.
My pick is they will. I got Ole Miss in this game. I think that my theme to this weekend is I think the teams that we've been waiting to see all year, I think they're all going to show up. I think most of them had this circled on the calendar, and I think they'll show. And if Ole Miss shows up, they will beat LSU. That's basically the way I see it. But I do agree that I don't think Kiffin's in one of those situations to where they're never getting rid of him because you're not getting better. You know, you're not at one of these programs to where you can just spin it. But I think trust,
bro. I don't trust.
I always
Kiffin feel like whenever there's a job available, he's always somehow.
I think Kiffin needs to win this game
because there's an upgrade. Kiffin comes up as a available candidate because, like, it's being honest. How many programs are an upgrade being a head coach over Ole Miss? That's why he pops up. Like, he was at Ole Miss, and like, if the Michigan job comes available, Alabama, Oregon, Ohio State,
Florida. Florida.
That's what I'm saying. Like, it really puts in perspective, like, how many programs would actually be an upgrade over Ole Miss, and why Ole Miss right now in the country stands the way it stands is because of Lane Kiffin being there, the charisma that he has, being able to attack the transfer portal. If Lane Kiffin wasn't such a personality, you wouldn't be able to hit the portal like you did. I don't think Ole Miss the alumni would buy into like trying to build a championship that way. But you got a Lane Kiffin that, these young guys, he clicks with this generation right now, and they would love to play for him. They're flashy, their uniforms are nice, and Lane Kiffin will get it seen. Like, he'll get you seen. So that's why I think, like, but every time a job opens, you start having conversations. Is it an upgrade over Ole Miss? Well, yes, because those are bigger programs, and they will use their resources, and they have more resources. Ole Miss is digging everything. Remember, Walker told us before the season, like, man, it's not sustainable to have to put this kind of money into an Ole Miss program to be competitive. Well, guess what? It would be for Florida, Ohio State, Michigan, Texas, Oklahoma. Like, there's 10, 15 teams in the country that you would be talking about. They get a Lane Kiffin. They will dump $30 million into that team in the offseason to try and create a competitive team, because they're just, Lane Kiffin is one of those personalities, and he's that coach that clicks with this generation. There's a few of those guys, and Lane Kiffin is one of those. Shoot, Ohio State's playing one in Dan Lanning. Like, Dan Lanning's one of those guys. He clicks with this generation. Like, he's one of those coaches this generation wants to play for. And you see it in recruiting. You see it online. Like, some of these guys, Oregon is still getting these big commits because they want to play for Dan Lanning, and his name gets popped up because there's about 10 to 12 jobs better than Oregon too. If Dan Lanning was to leave, he'd be a top candidate for some of these top jobs.
Well, let's just do this. We're on a bit of a time crunch with Mo Murphy, and I do not want to skip this segment. We're going to jump to the biggest game of the day, biggest game of the year to date so far. It's Ohio State traveling to Eugene, Oregon, 2 versus 3. It's what we perceive as the winner of this game is pretty much a shoe-in for one of the spots in the Big Ten championship game, which means a shoe-in for the playoffs. It's also just like sizing up. It's the first time, they've met as Big Ten opponents and so on and so forth. It's big time night game. Ohio State versus Oregon. I honestly, like, both teams look good. Neither one of them have slipped up on the way to this. They held up their end of the bargain. So we got one of the colossal matchups, and honestly, the history of college football, regular season games coming up Saturday night in Eugene. I couldn't be more excited or sick about it. I don't know what to do with it yet. I don't know how I'm going to get through it or whatever. But the first question I asked, this is an easy question. And then you guys, just like we just did, you tell us about the game. My question was, can Ryan Day, how important is this game to Ryan Day? And then just your thoughts, wherever you want to take them on the game. So, Chris, I'll start with you because Mo's got a lot to say. And you're more of a casual observer as far as like a little more impartial than me and Mo. Everybody on the planet is more impartial than me and Mo. Mm-hmm. But I'll ask it a little different way. What does this game, the outcome of this game, mean to you about mainly like Ryan Day and the Ohio State program, or Oregon and the Ohio State program? And then you give me your thoughts on who's going to win the game.
Well, obviously, I think it's crazy with Ryan Day and all like potential like firing, all that. And listen, I understand from maybe a fan perspective, like the expectations are obviously always high for Ohio State. So I get that. And obviously the losses to Michigan, which that should probably end this year. You guys should take care of business there. But, this is a big game. And you guys are, to me, the better team. You guys, the better offense, the better defense. Oregon hasn't looked as crisp. But they have won every game. You got that. It's give them credit. They have won every game, and it is an adjustment from going from the Pac-12 to the Big Ten, and they've definitely have tried to figure out that adjustment. But you guys, this is the atmosphere is going to be insane. I'm happy that my team's on a bye week, so I can actually just not stress all day and have to worry about my team playing so late and having the nerves and not caring about anything else other than the game. So I can enjoy the slate of football.
I envy you.
So I'm looking forward to this, but I mean, you guys can probably, you guys have the temperature of the Ryan Day stuff. Obviously, I'm seeing it from outside, and like I said, even if you guys do lose this game, I mean, it depends how, but I don't know if there's pressure on Ryan Day. I mean, there's pressure, but I still think it's crazy that the thought of firing him or anything, would be insane. But this is a big game. I think this is the biggest game of the year to date, right? I can't think of a bigger game so far. I mean, Alabama, Georgia. Georgia, yeah, that was a big game. That was just last week. I was thinking I'm Miami, Cal. I forgot that Bama, Georgia. That was a great 2 weeks ago. That was a big game. But yeah, this is. I'm looking forward to this, man. I know you guys are geeked up for this. Both teams. I think the last time you guys played them, that was Mario was the coach, right? When they came to your crib.
He was still there.
So there's motivation right there, because last time you played this team, they beat you.
They came to our crib and stomped us. Like
they came to the crib.
Ryan Day was the coach. That got to be personal enough. Like, you got to implement that into your players. I know not everybody. There's some on the roster that was here that year too. Yeah. Like, they were freshmen, they were young, but I think you got to make people feel that. Like, last time this team came in your crib, they bust your head, and now they're in your conference and think they can play with you.
And now they're rivals now. Now that was just a out of conference game. Now, no, we're rivals now. We see you every year now. We might see you twice a year. You know, 3 times potentially.
Rivalry, but Oregon and Ohio State have the potential to create a true rivalry.
If Ohio State wins, there's a real good chance that they'll see Oregon in the Big Ten championship game because of schedules.
And then it's crazy because we're now going to see rivalries that we're not used to. Like I just mentioned before with Cal and Miami, like that could be a rivalry. Like I never thought I would care about Cal, but now I'm like, okay, Cal's on my radar. And now with you guys, like you said, you got a taste of Oregon a few years back, but that was like, all right, that was a one-off. But now it's like, no, we're going to see you guys every year. So this could
and we beat them in the national championship game. I mean, it's been 10 years ago, but like it's been a pretty active riverry recently. There's a Rose Bowl game.
Right. You guys played
in the last couple decades. There's a national championship game. And so and then there's always the Nike rival. Like these two teams are very similar, just on different coasts. Like there's a lot of
the coolest top brands, like Oregon. We always talk about, the color scheme and being
this is an important game for the important game for the programs. So Mo, how do you see this game going? I know you already got a chip on your shoulder, as Herb Street likes to talk about, these poor Ohio State Buckeyes with no chance going into Eugene.
My thing is, I think this is Ryan Day. This is one of his most important games in his tenure as the Ohio State coach. I'm not saying if he loses, he gets fired. I'm not saying I want him fired if he loses. But like the trajectory of who you are, I think like you came into the season with expectations. You knew what was on your schedule. You had games circled on your schedule. You needed to handle business for the ultimate goal. But these games that were circled were very, very important. Oregon, Penn State, Michigan. Those 3 games in the regular season are were the 3 most important games that you penciled in on your way for the goal of winning a Big Ten championship and winning a national championship. You spent $20 million on this roster to be able to win those 3 games. This is your first one. This is your first true test. You're on a national stage. You're arguably going to be one of the 2 most watched games of the day. You're probably going to be the most watched most watched game at your time slot, but you do have Ole Miss, LSU, and respectively. The entire SEC will be paying attention to that game, especially because Alabama and Georgia, they play earlier in the day. So you get those other top teams out the way, and the full conference can focus on this game. If Ryan Day loses, there's a red X on your road to your ultimate goal, which was winning a national championship. There's a red X on everybody. Man, we don't have gold pants. This senior class don't have gold pants, and they don't have a Big Ten championship. So everything that we built this roster for, this was one of the games. This game is why this October 12th was so big. This was supposed to be number 2 versus number 3 is about where we thought it would be, maybe 1 versus 4, 2 versus 5, but somewhere in that realm, number 2 versus number 3, Ohio State, Oregon, Ole Miss, LSU. Those were always going to be the 2 premier games as long as teams handled their business, and for the most part, they have. And so they're not everybody's not unblemished, but they've handled enough business to make the buzz still happen about this Saturday. And so Ohio State has to win this game. And you're going on the road. I think you're the better team. You could say Dylan Gabriel's the better quarterback. I think they're pretty much hand in hand. They're about the same from what I've seen from both of them this year. So I don't necessarily think there's an advantage there, but I think you got the advantage everywhere else. I think you're the better team everywhere else. I think you got the better talent. As good as Oregon, I think they're one of the more talented teams. They're like Ole Miss. They're close to Ohio State, but they're still like a step or two behind as far as complete talent, top to bottom on the roster. But I think Ohio State, they have to win this game. Ryan Day has to, coach aggressively. He has to coach like he wants to win this game, like he knows how important it is to win this game, and that it's a statement to the rest of the country. Because guess what you will get to have that basically nobody else will have? Number 2, beating number 3. You might make a case to move the number 1 after this. This might be where now everybody considers Ohio State the best team in the country. And if they lose, now you're talking about we got to win every other game. Is that impossible? Is it impossible to think that they have to beat Penn State and they could? No, not at all. Is it impossible to beat Nebraska? Not at all. Is it possible to beat Michigan? Not at all. But you want those games to be maybe a Penn State can be your hiccup because you beat Oregon and you win that tiebreaker. So if you lose to Penn State, you still can play in the Big Ten championship. And who knows, you might be playing Penn State again. But you cannot cough up this game where this matters, where you trying to tell the world you are a national title contender. The world thought this was one of the best teams. Urban Meyer comes on and says this is one of the most talented, if not the most talented roster Ohio State has ever had. So in my opinion, you got to handle business for that circumstance. I do not think Ryan Day should or would get fired or really any hotter with the loss unless he got whooped.
It's really not.
Whooped, we're talking different.
It's not about him getting fired, but it does everything you just said. That this is why it's a must win for Ohio State, because you're built to win this very game. Not at the end of the year. This isn't, like Mo said, this isn't, Oregon didn't surprise everybody. Like last week, Miami played a surprisingly good Cal team. Nobody saw that coming. So then it became a very important game for the ACC, but nobody saw that. Like Mo said, this was on the schedule in, all summer. This game is circled. You knew everybody before it was going to be a walkthrough. Zero excuses for the Ohio State program coming out of this. It would be demoralizing. It would be hard to recover from, hard to get your team back up and fight through the rest of the season. It would feel like losing the national title. I think the ramifications of Ohio State losing would go deep. I don't think it would be no big deal. It's a 12-team playoff. I do not care. It would be deep. Oregon, I think.
And also your schedule is a little bit tougher than Oregon.
Exactly. Oh, no. That's what I said. If Ohio State loses.
Oregon has a cupcake schedule.
If Oregon wins, they're in. They're in a championship game.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting, but I know we don't have much more time with Mo. That's the big games. I definitely want to get that. Just real quick, Mo, get your thoughts. Does Oklahoma have a chance against Texas?
Yes, because it's the Red River rivalry. And at the end of the day, Oklahoma always has a chance. I mean, I think Texas is a better team. I think if Texas wants to continue to be serious, they are, to me, one of the best teams in the country. And so they should handle business against Oklahoma. I would pick Texas to win. I think they should win big, not too big, but they should. But this Oklahoma team look a little different since they made a quarterback change. We knew this Oklahoma team would have a good defense. We never came in questioning Oklahoma defensively. We just were like, well, what can they score enough points
to
win?
Weird to even say.
Right, but it's Brett Venables being the head coach. And so we know Brett Venables is a defensive-minded guy. So we never question their defense. Now, the thing is their defense good enough to slow down Texas? And if so, can this quarterback make enough plays in order to at least be competitive? Because if Oklahoma finds themselves down 27-24 heading into the fourth quarter, it's anybody's game at that point. And if Oklahoma feels like they can win, this is the Red River rivalry. We've seen some of the craziest things. We saw Texas a few years ago. Texas was up huge by 30 points, and then they made a quarterback change in the middle of the game. A freshman comes in and brings them all the way back, and Oklahoma beats Texas. So, this is one of those rivalries where we have seen some of the craziest outcomes in these games. So, I pound for pound, is Oklahoma good against Texas? Can they beat Texas? No. But in this type of game, I think Oklahoma's even season could be upsetting Texas could be everything. Beating Texas, knocking them off their high horse, and changing their trajectory for the rest of the season could be everything for them. We have to value. Sometimes this is teams like this Super Bowl. If Oklahoma can win this, it changes the trajectory for them. We start to have a different conversation. We got to look at the rest of their schedule. They have a tougher schedule than Texas do as far as being in the SEC. But if they can beat Texas, at that point, if you can beat the number one team, you start to think a ranked team with a good defense like Oklahoma could beat anybody when they match up against them. And so I'm looking at this game like it's possible. I don't think Oklahoma beats Texas, but could they scare them and have Texas back against the wall a lot longer than they should in this type of game? Yes, I could see that being possible. But I think Texas on a different mission too. I think their SEC championship, national championship aspirations. And so I don't think they're going to hiccup, especially watching all these other teams hiccup. This is a prime example for Texas to take care of business right here because everybody else got a hiccup on they got a blemish on the record except Texas.
Tennessee's favored by 14. They in trouble? That feels like way too much for what we saw last week.
I think they're in trouble.
They've had trouble scoring 20 points, and now we got them winning by 14 against a Florida team that looked much better.
Yeah, Florida.
One last one. I know you got to go do a great show with Locked On Buckeyes. Can Colorado beat Kansas State and make themselves a factor in the Big 12 from what we thought they were dead a few weeks ago?
Yes. Like I hate to say it because I said they're like a 6-win team coming into the season. And if they win this game, they'll be sitting at 5-1. Now, granted, remember they were like 4-0 last year when we saw second half season collapse. So I still think that's plausible. But if you beat a Kansas State team, which I don't think is that good because they do have a bad loss, but they also got a good win and looked a lot better. So, yes, I mean, at that point, they're in the driver's seat. Colorado's losses to who? Nebraska, outside of conference.
Exactly. Thank you. That's what I keep factoring in. Like, it's about winning the
Big 12.
It's about winning the conference this year. It is not about the voters. That's what I keep, like, stay undefeated in your conference. You can lose 3 games. Stay undefeated in your conference. So, Moa, you check out whenever you got to check out, buddy.
Right,
that was
awesome. I'm about to go ahead and Locked On Buckeyes. Appreciate y'all. Glad we got to do, we were looking forward to this all week. Y'all will hear from me on Locked On
next week. Big show next week.
Next week is when everything crumbles and we start to talk about college football and its rightful place, Heisman winners and all that. But I do appreciate you, Jeff, Chris. Yeah. I will holler at y'all later.
Okay, Chris, now we'll cover the rest of the games. Thanks to Mo for being on. That was awesome. Real quick, your thoughts on Texas, Oklahoma. Basically, it's as simple as this. The only way Oklahoma can win is if Arch Manning's quarterback play declined a little bit as a freshman and filling in for Ewers. It's really the health of Ewers. Can he get knocked out of the game, and can it be freshman versus freshman? Then I think Oklahoma has the classic puncher's chance because of all the stuff most of. How do you feel about Oklahoma? It's got to be awesome for a New York City guy to talk about Oklahoma, Texas football.
Yeah, and then it's now has its SEC,
yes, SEC. It's a conference
feel
game.
To it. It's
a conference game. So somebody's losing the conference game. This isn't. Yeah. So I mean, it means a lot.
If you're Oklahoma, it's obviously always a big game. But obviously, when you're in the Big 12, I mean, Oklahoma was on par, if not above Texas. But now Texas is, they seemingly fit well in the SEC. And last year they made the playoff. And now it seems like Texas, the big dog, they're going to recruiting. They got the best QB room in the country. And I was like, Oklahoma is kind of, like what I mentioned before, the offense, it's now reverse. We're so used to seeing Heisman Trophy winning, Biletnikoff winning guys, and now it's the opposite. The defense is what's carrying this team, and the offense is bottom tier. So if you're Oklahoma, this is big because if you can upset Texas, we be like, hey, we were right with you in the Big 12, and guess what? We're gonna be right with you in the SEC.
That's a great point about, like, everybody buried Oklahoma after the Tennessee loss, and Oklahoma took a step back, and they're not gonna be able to compete in this conference. But then we saw Alabama lose, we saw Georgia lose, we saw Ole Miss lose. So now we're like, oh, wait a minute, everybody can take a loss. This isn't the superhero conference that we thought. And then if somehow you can muster up a game plan, you get Ewers, maybe he's not feeling good or he's off a little bit.
I'm saying, yeah.
and I mean, there's no way. I mean, in all sincerity, there's no way that we can say any team can't win or lose after what we saw Alabama, Vanderbilt, after we saw Ole Miss, Kentucky.
Yeah.
From what we've saw this year, it would be silly because Oklahoma's got a talented defense, or a little banged up. But you just never know. There is no quote unquote home field advantage here. It's split down the middle, Texas State Fair.
That's another thing too. There's no home.
Yeah, but we saw weird things when it's rivalry games, and again, motivation. I think Texas wins comfortably, but I'm also saying that if Ewers limps out in the first quarter, now we're having a different conversation. So I still always an interesting game. I've watched it since I was a kid. It stinks that it's not on at noon this year like it always was. No big deal though. I'll be watching, enjoying. I love rivalry games. They're my favorite. College football rivalry games of any sort are my favorite thing in sports. So I'll be watching. We don't have to spend a lot of time on this. It's kind of a weird game. Tennessee, first few weeks of the season, flying high, freshman Heisman contender, all the above. They beat Oklahoma. And when they beat Oklahoma, they're like, nice win. You went to Norman, with a young quarterback, beat Oklahoma. Tennessee, you are a competitor in the SEC. And everybody gave them the benefit of the doubt and said they took their foot off the gas in the second half and coasted to a victory. Well, 3 weeks later, they got a loss. They haven't been able to score points. Quarterback looked like a freshman last week. So now all of a sudden we're like, oh, did you take your foot off the gas, or are there problems on the offense? Is this a real thing? Then we watch a Florida team that we had buried week 1, week 2, completely buried in the program. Everybody's getting fired, switch quarterbacks. And then all of a sudden Florida looks good last week. So now we got a rivalry game, and we got a Florida team going one way. We've got a Tennessee team with huge question marks as far as their quarterback, like where he's at in his progression. He's going to be good, but he doesn't look the same as he did week 1 or week 2. Tennessee's favored. This one I do want to talk about the gambling side of it, because Tennessee's favored by 14. That's a big number.
That's a lot of points
for everything I just said. Again, they're having trouble scoring points, and that means they got to score 14 more. Can you make any sense of this, or is it a mistake by Vegas and everybody going to get paid Saturday?
That's my thing. Is this a trap? Is it a trap? Like, because Tennessee has struggled the last 2 games, like I said, to score points. Florida's played better, 14 points. You're like, oh, are they thinking that everyone's gonna be like, oh yeah, we're Florida plus 14.5? Yeah, that should be
That's
a lot.
What happened to me. And my first gut instinct.
Yeah, and then Tennessee comes out and they look like the offense that they look like, the first few games. So it's like, but like this offense, it's especially after the NC State was supposed to be a team that was going to maybe compete for an ACC championship, right? That people were really high on them. They go to NC State. And they absolutely, and I think that's when the hype really became. They beat them up, and then now we realize NC State isn't as good as we thought. But that's the thing, is like these offenses, we see these outbursts the first few weeks from we've seen them in Ole Miss and a lot of teams that they score 70 points, like, oh, this offense, and then they get into the trenches with some real teams, and it's like, oh, okay, maybe their offense was good because they were playing some bottom tier Division I programs. That's why their offense looked good. They put the game mode on rookie, and when you put the game mode on rookie, you're gonna look good. You're gonna pad some stats. You're gonna look nice. And they've come to life. So this is an interesting, and this is the one I was, because initially I'm like, you know what, Florida, they have improved. They do look better. And betting wise, I'm like, 14.5, I think. But now that you got me thinking, I'm like, man, this could be a trap. I can see Tennessee. I can see Tennessee just winning by 30, because Florida still isn't a good football team. Like, regardless of they've looked better since my Hurricanes stomped them, in the beginning of the year, but they're still not a good football team. And Tennessee offense still is good. It just has, they played some better teams lately. So it's like, all right, me and Mo talked about the other day too. Tennessee, that loss last week was huge. So they got Florida coming up. We don't know what to do with this, but next week, Alabama, they got a Kentucky team coming up that we know, if you're not ready on offense, can get you. Then they've got a Georgia team later in the season, and they finish the season with Vanderbilt. So A, they should win this game, and B, they have to.
They can't if they drop their second to this Florida with those. They got another one on the schedule. They're a 3-loss SEC team, as good as the SEC team is. SEC is and deep. They're kind of done. So yeah, I think Tennessee wins, but I'm going Florida in the points. It just I'm think sometimes they make mistakes and you take advantage of it.
That could be it.
And honestly, it's just the way the quarterback played last week. He's going to be fine, but sometimes you can't fix that in a week. And there's some problems with the offense, and they're out of sync, and they're not running the ball like they did. And I think it's a real thing, but we'll see. So another one I want to talk about, and Mo got to touch on it. Colorado's, they've been buried. We asked them to stop talking about them, whatever, and then all of a sudden they start playing a little bit better and a little tougher. Now they're undefeated in the conference. They're playing Kansas State, who is also undefeated in the conference. Can Colorado put themselves back into the discussion of the playoffs this week?
The Big 12 is a mess.
Exactly.
So we thought Oklahoma State was going to be maybe the team in the Big 12, and they have fallen off. They think they lost 3-4 in a row. They've struggled mightily. Out of the Gundy, it might be time, man. He's been there for a while, and they kind of haven't really done much. And I know, like with programs like that, you're okay with being at a certain level, but it's like, all right, man, he's been there for almost 20 years. Like, it's like, all right, I think he's more remembered about the speech he made about, being 40 than he is as being a football coach, and that was 15 years ago. I'm a man, I'm 40. That's what he's more remembered than actually winning football games, So, but yeah, the Big 12 has been all over the place. And Jeff, Colorado can do something that people absolutely, a lot of people are going to be sick if this happens. If they can win the Big 12 and get into the playoff, people who, especially after the Nebraska game, or even before that, but the Nebraska game, they were like, see, Deion don't know what it is, blah, blah, blah. And then they go out and they could win the Big 12 and be the Big 12 representative in the playoff and be a top 4 seed, right? They get a top 4 seed, right? The Power 4 gets top 4.
If you win, if you win your conference, you get it.
Jeff.
And they have good teams.
Crazy.
I'm just saying, the Big 12, like Utah is taking a step back. They're a little disjointed.
Yeah, their quarterback situation,
Kansas State, but like you got Brigham Young at the top, but like Colorado's got, Cincinnati left.
Kansas State's not really good.
No,
right?
Oklahoma State, who you talked about, like there's not like, let's put it this way. If they play really good, there's a chance that there's no team on their schedule that they can't beat. They don't have an Ohio State, an Ole Miss, in Alabama, anybody on their schedule in their way.
Yeah,
so like if they can muster it up every week, if they can get through this one, then that's going to give them, they're going to have to lose. They're going to lose one, but still that puts them in contention to go to the Big 12 title game. And with Travis Hunter and Sanders, I think there's a realistic possibility. 77% of the money is on Kansas State and the -3.5, which makes me want to go all in on Colorado. The public is just pounding Kansas State, and I'm like, uh-oh. So I don't know. That's a game. It's going to be late. I'll keep my eye on it. And Kansas State wins, then all of a sudden it really doesn't mean much. But I just think it's worth keeping my eye on because Colorado's been playing better. And
Colorado doesn't play, like you said. Colorado, I mean, Texas Tech, I don't know how good we think Texas Tech is.
None of them are great. They can be. Iowa State's decent, but I don't think they have them on their schedule.
But they don't have them. They have. I got their schedule right now. So they got Kansas State. They go to Arizona next week. Then it's Cincy. Then they go to Texas Tech, Utah. We don't know what that Utah team's going to look like.
Exactly.
If Rising isn't playing. Kansas at Kansas. Kansas. We thought that team would be. I mean, they're
not who we thought they were.
We thought they were going to be a surprising, Big 12 contender. They only got one win. And then Oklahoma State has been disappointing too. So like Colorado, they don't play some of the better teams in the Big 12. We don't even know who is the better team in the Big 12, to be honest. So Colorado, I mean, they get this win, and
And there's also like there's a lot of other we're not going to go through every game. Nobody wants to go through every game, but just for the record, like this is a deeper schedule than we've even talked about. Keep just one tiny little eye on Alabama, South Carolina, and see how Alabama responds from the humiliation last week. Pittsburgh Cal is all of a sudden a pretty important game.
Jeff, before and I don't know if you talked to Mo about the Vandy Alabama game, but
oh yeah, we definitely did.
When you come off a big win like they had against a rival like Georgia, and especially if you just look at the first half of that game, they dominated. Like they look like, oh, this is the best team in the country. Jalen Milroe is a Heisman contender. We know what Ryan Williams, what he can do. Did you know he was 17? By the way, I didn't know that, Jeff.
Yeah, apparently
he's 17. I just found out today. But if you take away, all right, that hot start and then the second half, should we have not? And I know people talked about it, but maybe we should have put that like, okay, all right, they dominated for most of the game, but they did let Georgia come back, and I know it's Georgia, so that's still a good team.
Alabama actually in that game, like to your thing, really, they got whooped for 3 quarters.
Yeah,
like they look great for a quarter. They got whooped for 3 quarters.
So. Like, yes, and it's Vanderbilt, and you should beat Vanderbilt. Even you playing Bama at their C- game, usually would probably still win that game. But yes. I think they just looked at, okay, this is Vanderbilt, and like, no, but Vanderbilt's improved. Like, they've looked like they better football team. So, like, no longer can you play your C- game versus Vanderbilt anymore. Because if you play your C- game and Vanderbilt comes out and plays a B+, A+ game, you could lose now. And I know, like, now we all went for, oh, DeBoer is great. Like, he was, and now we people kind of tailed off him. I just wonder, like, how they respond to that, because we saw the antics of I forgot one of the seniors. He kind of kicking the ball and he was yelling. I forgot the guy's name. I think he was a defensive back. He kind of went crazy. But I also understand the frustrations of that, because he's like, yeah, we should not be this should not be a game. We should not be down 10 for Vanderbilt with 5 minutes left in the ball game. So I understand the first. Yes, did he get a little out of hand? I understand that, but like, we just beat Georgia. And then we stomped Wisconsin a few weeks ago when people are, Wisconsin might maybe. No, we beat them by like 50. And then we're losing by 10 to Vanderbilt
and got beat up by Vanderbilt.
So like, that's my thing, is what's the psyche of the team right now? I don't know, because that's a tough place to be, where you just beat your rival in Georgia. And
you wasted that victory is what.
And you wasted the victory.
They would rather have lost to Georgia and beat Vandy.
Yes.
They would be in a better place right now. I'm totally with you.
Because it makes sense. Because, like, okay, you lose to Georgia. Okay, Georgia's the number 1 team in the country. Yep. That makes sense. But you lose to Vanderbilt, like. Yep. But
start second guessing that. Here's the also
exactly.
The thing. South Carolina's not near as good as Vanderbilt. It's going to be fine. But just to put a bow on all of this, there are 7 top 25 games involving top 25 teams this Saturday that have under a 4-point spread. That's incredible. That's under crazy. 4 is basically like home field plus a safety. I mean, that's really close. So like, there's matchups up and down. It's going to be a great Saturday of college football. I can't wait. But
Jeff, let me ask you one more thing. I want to get your
Absolutely.
take on this, because obviously, my Canes played in a wild game. I'll be honest, I couldn't stay up for the game. It ended at 3:30. I tried to troop it. Couldn't do it physically. I literally went before when Cam Ward threw the pick 6. I did a little prayer. I said, if whatever happens, I'll take it. If we lost, okay. I wake up and I see this 25-point comeback. But you mentioned this before, like close wins, and we've back-to-back close wins. Do you think that's something that is worrisome, that we've had back, like the last 2 games have literally come down to the last possession? Or, because the Virginia Tech game is whatever, but like when I saw the start of that Cal game, and how it was going, I was like, oh, okay, this is the slip up, because we had the close win.
Yeah.
This is the game where, like, okay, we're just not ready. You know, that took a lot out of us. But I'm like, but then the other side is me like, okay, we were down 25, but we came back and we won, and against a Cal team that's better than we expected. So like, what should be my feeling? You know, we got the bye week, but what should be my feeling as a Miami fan? How should I feel? Should I feel good? Should I feel like, okay, you know, all right, we got away with, you know, two close wins, but we won. So like, what should be my feeling right now as a fan?
So
give me your perspective as an outsider.
So me and Mo talked about this, particularly as a Miami fan, because we
lose these games.
They've lost these
for
games. A decade. They've lost these games. So particularly in that situation, I would be like, okay, we figured out a mentality. Most of it has to do with the quarterback, but regardless, we figured out a mentality to not throw these games away when we could let them go. We fight back, you know, we keep going, we keep winning. I mean, on the field, yes, you have to figure out what is causing Virginia Tech to compete with Miami is an issue. Sometimes it's just like, it's hard to win football games. Like we've learned that. Like we just talked about Vanderbilt and Alabama. So I would be optimistic as a Miami fan to be like, okay, the difference that we said we needed for all this time was a quarterback. That's why we're not going to lose these games. And most people, he's one of the few guys in the country that can get down 25 and win a game. So I would take it mostly optimistic, but also in the back of my mind, I'd be like, you can't keep doing this.
Yeah,
somebody's going to get you.
So long. Yeah.
But I mean, but also winning close games does build a certain type of mentality and a certain type of, you know, strength and confidence in a team that you're going to need down the road. Probably winning that Virginia Tech game is why they won the Cal game, and so on and so forth. So if I would be optimistic if I was a Miami fan, mainly undefeated. And that's a tough, regardless of what you want to say about traveling, you know, as far away from home as you can and playing a late game at a weird time, you know, you're starting, you know, at, 7:30, you know, your time, or no, they were started at 10:30, didn't it? It actually started at 10:30, right?
That game started at 10:30.
To live on the East Coast and start at 10:30, that factors in. Like, so I would, if that was at home, I would be more concerned. But if I was you, I'd be like, my team doesn't care if they're down, if they're they can blow somebody out or they can come back. Our quarterback is not scared of anything. So most of the takeaway that me and Mo talked about, most of the takeaway would be, hey, these are the games we always lost. We don't do that anymore. Like, I think after the last couple of weeks, be like, we don't do that anymore. So we're good. Like, you don't have it in the back of your mind, we're going to throw this game away.
Yeah. And that's how I'm feeling.
Good schedule. Like, you guys are in great shape for a playoff spot. So if I was a Miami fan, I'd be pretty happy.
And then that's been my take is, okay, like, all right, these last two games have been obviously really stressful, like coming down to like the last possession, but we're in this position because we have a quarterback. We lose these. Jeff, you saw last year we've lost so many close games. Like, low key, we could have been in the ACC title game, but we lost so many close games because of poor quarterback play.
Crappy game.
Terrible
quarterback play.
And it's like, we went 7-6 last year. I mean, we should have been a 10-win football team, realistically, but quarterback play, the reason why we only won 7 games. And to have a quarterback to know, okay, hey, I messed up. Like, he threw the pick, that interception he threw where he scrambles to the right and he's throwing it. I'm like, oh, that's just not good. And the pick 6, especially against a team that leads the league and leads the country in interceptions. You can't do that. But he puts it on. He's like, my bad. I got you guys. And that's the thing, is when you believe in your quarterback and you're like, no, guys, we're down. I know we're down 25. It's not ideal, but guess what? He got us. He got us. And I think that's refreshing because we haven't had that in a long time. So it feels good, but it's like, all right, no more of these close, please. We're going to Louisville next week. I think Louisville might be favorite in that game too. So that's going to be a game that's going to be interesting
after this week. But I wouldn't be too concerned. And your schedule's not horrible. You got a great schedule. You know, basically you should beat every team in your schedule. Get yourself into that matchup with what I assume is going to be Clemson. It's going to be a great ACC championship game. But I mean, they're figuring stuff out every week. They're learning how to play together, just like all these other teams. Just like,
we got a lot of transfers, a lot of new guys.
All the good teams figured out how to play together. fit everybody in and trying to do it in time. So yeah, overall, I would consider it a great start to the season from Miami.
I'll take it.
All right, man. On that note, I like it. Again, give me a great Saturday. Can't wait. I'm glad Chris can sit back and enjoy it and doesn't have to sweat another game out from the Hurricanes.
Can't do it.
Again, everybody check out the Off the Ball Network YouTube channel. Check us out on X.
500 subs. We hit 500 subs.
Thanks everybody. We appreciate it. Pretty good viewership tonight, by the way. Thanks for everybody that watches, everybody that comments, everybody. I say this every time. It's the interaction that fuels this thing. We love it. We take what you say and we take what you put out into the world, into context and develop thoughts on it, and then go back. So thanks to Mo, thanks to Chris. This was the OG3 Off the Ball Network. Have a great weekend, everybody. Thanks, Chris. It's been awesome, man. And all the basketball fans out there, it's ramping up. It's heating up. My man is putting out all kinds of content. So check out the Off the Ball podcast page and all that. So again, we appreciate it. Good night, everybody. Good luck, and have a great weekend.